Um, it sounds easy, but actually it's difficult to answer. It's best to answer the question by taking a moment to reflect on the different challenges that indigenous peoples face today. And when I'm asked that question, I always uh, look back, at the situation and the things, the activities that our partners, organizations, and communities are doing. Let's take a look at the work of our friends, our fellow indigenous peoples from Manipur, the Meitei people, and from the indigenous peoples of Sikkim, the Lepcha people in northeast India. They work tirelessly and build awareness among the different communities on the importance of land and the need to protect their rivers, their forest, which is also a source of their livelihood and identity. And they do this especially at this time where there are very, very big threats that undermine their rights, especially as indigenous peoples. Another source of inspiration would be the Ogoni people of Nigeria, who for several decades have been excluded in decision-making powers. We now see them slowly and gradually standing up for their rights. They have managed to reclaim the control and governance of their territories, including the resources in these territories, the women, the youth, and in fact, the entire community are active not only in fighting for their rights, but also being able to realize these rights. And closer to home, which is also very, very inspiring, is the case of our brothers and sisters in West Papua and in Indonesia. So even in the midst of violence against environment, climate activists, land defenders, human rights defenders, they never lose hope, they never lose heart in practicing their culture and enhancing their culture to be able to face these challenges and everyday threats. You can always hear their strong aspiration for a green and sustainable land anchored on participative development and their right to self-determination. Another inspiring story or experience in Africa is that of the Agyek and Sengwer people, who are largely forest dwellers who made a landmark win inside and outside trial courts in upholding their role as number one forest heroes, as number one forest protectors. Initially, they got displaced out of their forest lands, but they never gave up. They continued documenting their stories of their elders to preserve their tradition and be able to pass this on to the next generation. Well, in our case here in the Philippines, the indigenous peoples, leaders, communities, organizations are in a crucial place, being number one in Asia in terms of killings of environmental and land defenders. But despite the situation, they're not discouraged, but rather they are pushed to continue the struggle. No, they don't give up despite the killings, despite these numerous human rights violations. They are very much active. We are very much active in building solidarity among ourselves, among indigenous peoples. So there are many, many other stories of indigenous peoples in Asia, in Pacific, in Africa, Latin America, and even in the first world, in North America. And their work is the foundation of what kind of future we are fighting for. Studies and evidences speak volumes. The work of indigenous peoples and advocate and advocates is key in environmental defense and the battle against climate change. In the struggle for land, for self-determination, for identity that we indigenous peoples are fighting for, we need you. We need all the kind of support that we can get from different communities, individuals, and organizations around the world. Every day, the attacks on our lands, rights and lives are escalating. So every bit of support is key in funding indigenous peoples' movements and environment and rights defenders to respond in emergency and urgent situations. Your assistance would help us to impact more communities on. I think at the end of the day, together, our strength is in our solidarity. And this is the future that we are fighting for. A future where indigenous peoples, environmental defenders, climate activists, and the people enjoy a sustainable, healthy, free, and just world. I am Beverly Longid. I am a Bontoc and Kangkanaoy from the Cordillera, Philippines, and I am the Global Coordinator of the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation. Join the movement, fight for our future.